Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. Welcome back to our lesson for today. Well, before we start, I have a question for all of you. What do you like to do during your free time? Can you share it with me? Or what kind of sport that you like to play? So today, I'm going to share with all of you the sport that I love to do so much. And it is skateboarding. Yes, skateboarding. So I started playing it since I was 16. And I keep on playing it until today and now with my kids. So what is it about skateboarding? So basically it is just a sport. But what is the relationship between this thing or this sport equipment and our lesson for today? Remember that we are going to discuss about sources of description in technical description. So by using sources of description, I'm going to technically describe about this sport equipment with all of you. So what are we waiting for? Let's go! Okay, when you are going to describe about a product technically, you need to use sources of description. So what are the contents for sources of description? As you can see on the screen over here, we have elements such as the purpose, size, shape, color, it goes up to dimension, texture, materials, how the product is being combined or compiled or attached, the orientation of the parts, the capacity, the volume or the amount, the pattern or the design, the smell, and also the age of the parts itself. So when you are going to describe about a product technically, you can use sources of description as an element to guide you to describe in detail about the unique parts or the parts of the product. So I'm going to use sources of description afterwards when I'm going to describe about the unique parts of a skateboard that I've shown to you earlier. So let's go to the next part, and I'll see you there. Okay, let's have a look at the cross-sectional part of the skateboard or a complete skateboard. So over here you can see a grip tape. So how to spell it? Then we have the deck. So the use of the deck is actually to attach or to be attached to both of the trucks over here. So we call this thing as the truck. And then in order for you to roll from one point to another point, you need to have the wheel. And in order for you to attach the truck to the deck, you need to have the mounting nut. And lastly, of course, when you need to move from one point to another point, the bearing should be inside the wheel. So these are the bearing. So basically over here you can see a cross-sectional outlook of a complete skateboard. So we have the deck, we have the grip tape, we have the truck, we have the bearing, the wheel, and lastly we have the mounting nut. But for the video, I'm going to only emphasize on 4 unique parts of a complete skateboard, which are the deck, the truck, the bearing, and lastly the wheel. So in order for me to describe in detail about all of the 4 unique parts over here, I'm going to use sources of description. Okay, let's have a look at the first unique part of the complete skateboard, which is the deck. So when we are going to describe about the deck, technically we are going to use sources of description, and in this context I'm going to use dimension, I'm going to use material used to produce the deck, and I'm going to use the color. Okay, for the deck itself, the dimension should be measured like this. This is going to be the length of the deck. This is going to be the width of the deck. And of course, over here we have not height, but in this context we use thickness. So when we are referring to dimension, we're going to use this kind of measurement in order to describe about this product or this unique part in detail. For example, the length of the deck can be within certain inches. For example, if you're going to talk about the width, it can be starting from 7 inch up to 8.5 inch. That is going to be the width of it. So the length of the deck can somehow be between 29.5 inch up until 32 inch. And when we are talking about the thickness, perhaps you can mention that a normal deck being produced using 7 or 8 ply of maple wood. So this is how you are going to describe in detail about this unique part using dimension. Next, when we are talking about the material, so this particular unique part, the whole deck, is being produced using maple wood. And lastly, when we are going to talk about the color of this particular unique part, so we can say that you have a wide selection of color. It can be in the form of wood color, it can be in the form of black, white, red, or it can also be in the aspect of graphics. So this is how you're going to use sources of description when you are describing about certain unique parts. Okay, now let's talk about the wheel. As you can see over here, we have 4 wheels on a complete skateboard. But how it is being produced. So when you are using sources of description, perhaps for the wheel, when you are going to describe it technically, you can use the material used to produce the wheel. In this context, urethane. You can also talk about the wheel size, and it ranges from 52 millimeter up until 59 millimeter. When you are going to describe about the color as well, so you can have a wide selection of the colors for the wheel. In this picture, for example, you have the white color. It can also go up to yellow, black, or maybe red. One of the most important aspects that you need to have to roll from one point to another point will be the bearing. As you can see on the picture here, we have a bearing being made from steel, and a standard size for the bearing is an industrial standard size of 608. You cannot see it clearly over here, but basically if you have the bearing with you, you can see that the number being printed on the cover of the bearing. And the dimension of a bearing is actually with a bore of 8 millimeter times by 22 millimeter of outer diameter, and the width will be of 7 millimeter. So the bearings are usually made from steel, but sometimes it is also being produced using high-tech ceramic. Okay, let's move on to the last unique part of a complete deck, which is the truck. For the last unique part of a complete skateboard over here, we are going to talk about the trucks. So a complete truck, as you can see on the picture, consists of several smaller parts. For example, we have the base plate over here. We also have the kingpin in the middle part of it. We have the bushing. Then we have the axle nut, and also other smaller parts. So when you are using sources of description, when you are going to describe about a product technically, you need to identify all the other smaller parts at that particular unique part, and from there you need, or you can use sources of description to describe each smaller unique parts that we have over here. For example, what is the purpose of the base plate? So this is going to be the base where you are going to attach the truck to the deck. Okay, so you're going to attach the base plate to the truck or to the deck. Alright, so I hope by looking at all of the description over here, you will know how to describe a product technically, especially using sources of description. So if you have any question regarding sources of description or perhaps technical description in detail, you can watch the whole video again, or you can also reach me through our Telegram group. But basically, the best thing that you can do is to go through the notes or the handouts on sources of description, and you watch the video on how you are going to use sources of description for the technical description part. And hopefully after you have completed the task, you will know on how to describe a product technically using sources of description. Okay, so all of you have seen how I take off the parts of this skateboard. I mean, starting from the wheel, the bearing inside of it, then the truck, and also the deck. So basically, if you can really see it by now, I have described this skateboard using sources of description, which are 4 main parts of it. I'm looking at the wheel, the bearing, the truck, and also the deck itself. So after you have watched the entire video, you will know by now how to use sources of description when you are going to explain or when you are going to describe about the parts of a product. So in this context, I have used 4 unique parts, which are the wheel, the bearing, the truck, and also the deck. And I have also described to all of you using sources of description. For example, when you are talking about the deck, what is the length, what is the width, and what is the height of the deck itself, together with the material used to create or to form this deck, and also what kind of design or color that you can have when you buy the deck. So basically, I have covered up everything regarding sources of description, and I hope by now you will know how to use sources of description when you are going to describe a product technically. And you will know by now when you are describing about a product, these are the things that you need to consider. So that's all from me. Thank you very much for joining me today, and let's skate. Bye.